Hi, welcome to Green Shoe Conversations, episode 12. I'm Stephany Cochran. I'm the executive director for the Green Shoe Foundation. We are a mental health organization who specialize in a 5-day intensive outpatient retreat for adults 21 and older, dealing with relational trauma, codependency, addiction recovery, depression, just life difficulties. And with me today, I've got some of my awesome team members. So, hey guys. I've got Stephen Brinkworth, one of our therapists here at Green Shoe, and Rebecca Holt, another one of our awesome therapists. How are y'all doing?
Doing good.
Good. Well, thanks for joining me today. We're all in different places today, too, so this is kind of cool. Again, the fun thing that we're still going through with this lovely pandemic that we're in, which I know we're going to get into here in a minute. Last week, Steve, you were with me. And we started the topic of one of our core issues for our model is reality. So I love it, Rebecca, that you get to kind of come in too, because we wanted to continue that conversation. This is a core issue. I mean, again, our reality is our foundation of, kind of who we are. It's how we take in data and how we then do our data out. So Rebecca, why don't you kind of talk to us a little bit about that core issue and kind of give us your perspective?
Yeah, and I had watched the podcast from last week, and one thing that really stood out to me that I just kind of wanted to remind everyone, but just that your reality is formed from such a young age. And so I always, when I think of reality, I always think of Erik Erikson and the stages of development. And that initial one, if you think about it, trust versus mistrust. And so what that's saying is a child comes into this world and they learn if they can trust the world or if they cannot trust the world. So for example, they learn that their needs and wants might not get met. Well, I can't trust the world, or they might learn I'm taken care of, so I can trust the world. And so just at a very young age, we start learning about that reality and it starts forming who we are. It's a huge part of our identity. And so a lot of times with reality, if we're an adult again, and you guys talked about this last week so wonderfully, but if we're an adult and we're experiencing a different reality from someone else, we really start to question who we are in this reality, and maybe even questioning the things outside of us. Is this real or not? And what do I do with it?
And so that's where we get that creation of self.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
And we showed this last week, but I want to kind of show it again because it really kind of explains everything just in one simple picture. We've all seen this cartoon of I'm fine, this is fine, and it really makes me wonder how many of us are saying this right now in our world. I'm fine, everything's great.
That is, whenever you showed that last week, this is one of my favorite memes. Just because how many times in life have we been in this? We've been the little dog that's like, everything's fine. We'll figure it out.
No problem.
Yeah, and especially right now, it's, with COVID and just the uncertainty. So I love this.
Yeah, it's kind of sad though, because how hot are you going to let the fire get? Or it's not okay.
Yeah.
And I know there's so many different components with this, and really, today we kind of wanted to talk about that part of not being in reality, that kind of are out of, reality with that. But Steve, when we were talking, about this a couple of days ago, you were stressing how much that everybody experiences this, that there's strengths and there's weaknesses, with this. And this is not just something that happens to somebody who experienced significant trauma. This is all of us.
Absolutely. And we've all got strengths and weaknesses, and that's part of being human. As we start to get into comparing that reality, I may look at my strengths and feel that I'm better than somebody else. I may look at my weaknesses and feel like I'm less than somebody else. And so in that moment of comparison, I'm also creating a reality that has to do with my worth, my value, what I deserve, those needs and wants. And so in those strengths and weaknesses, there can be opportunities that arise at any given day that I start to get into a thinking pattern that may not be in balance. And so I may be taking that to an extreme where if, say, my strengths are speaking in public, that I see somebody falter when they're speaking about a topic, and I might start to try and build myself up about how I could do that better.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't feel like I'm a good public speaker and I see someone who's up there speaking really well, I might disconnect from what's going on and focus on those weaknesses that I feel I have and start to be judgmental. And so in the model, I'd be in my adapted, and that adapted would be looking at what's taking place and be very judgmental, critical, and even angry at times. And so those strengths and weaknesses are something that are simply a part of our humanity. Our strengths don't make us any better than anybody else. Our weaknesses don't make us any less than anybody else.
Yeah.
Both are just pieces that help to define our humanity.
Great points. Rebecca, any thoughts?
Yeah, so, one thing we talked about is when we take ourselves out of reality and disconnect with ourselves and our reality. And I think about this model, and really that's a survival skill that we talk about, to escape reality. And that, it ties in so much of the model, because, if our window of tolerance is, here's my reality in this window of tolerance, and then my reality is skewed because I feel better than, I feel less than, whatever it is, somebody has a different reality. What are you going to do to cope with being out of that window of tolerance or being out of your reality? And so, for example, that's where a lot of times addictions come into play. I might have trouble connecting with my reality because it's so painful. So I cope with substances to get out of that. It may not be substances. I cope with activities or being busy, as I talk about quite a bit, but looking at what takes you out of your reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Rebecca, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about how other people may be an opportunity for me to leave my own reality as well. Because if I get into that caregiving mode or caretaking mode and people pleasing, that my focus is entirely on what they need. So I don't have to look at my own stuff.
Yeah, no, I can absolutely relate to that. When I hear you talk about that, and I know I've shared that a lot about my people pleasing mode. If I can make everybody happy or work on fixing them, then it's not just about, I don't have to fix me, then there's nothing wrong with me. And I think that's where my, will skew my own reality and kind of create that. Well, and there's actually, what we do is those cognitive distortions. And they're all different and everything. And so one thing that we do is we kind of look at those, and these can also be survival skills, for people. So we're not saying that they're bad, or they're wrong, but it's kind of what we do with that input that we get in and how we can distort different things. So I really wanted to go through these and kind of even identify where we fit in and how, we kind of have used some of those before with those. And so I've got to get in my own reality, and of course our perfectly imperfect slide here. Colleen.
This is reality.
It is reality. Yeah, the reality y'all don't realize is I actually lost y'all a minute ago, and so that's why I'm like, oh, let me see if I can get them back. But I really love this. So the first one, all or nothing thinking. And again, I immediately can think of ways that I've done that or how I've seen that in others. So talk a little bit about that one.
So that all or nothing thinking is going to be just, it's either this or it's this. It's very like black and white thinking. So maybe I receive information and I go to it's all of this. There's no in between. There's no, I'm going to sit and think about it for a little bit and decide where I land on it. Mm-hmm. It's just that extreme thinking. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, what about the overgeneralization then?
So with the overgeneralization, I can have an event take place and say, back to that public speaking, say I mess up, and I may take that one little mistake that I made and use that to have a broad lens that I'm looking at everything through. And so because I've messed this up, because I didn't do it right, that I don't do anything right. Mm-hmm. So I overgeneralize that and make it a broad label that goes to everything. And so I can see that one event being something much bigger than it is.
Yeah. And then that kind of, like you said, you internalize that and you take that and it now applies to everything.
I'm not ever going to do it right again.
Yeah.
I'm not ever going to be able to get this right.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Ever is a big word.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
It's a big word. Never is a big word.
Yes.
And it sounds an awful lot like the cognitive distortion you just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
I can use both of those at the same time.
Yeah. Or you kind of, you can flip into those back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
What is mental filter?
That's a lot like overgeneralization. So the way that we describe it, it's like a single drop of ink in a glass of water and it just discolors the whole thing. So it's like you have one bad thing happen in a day and it just discolors the whole day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe you have something where you feel like, oh, I did that wrong. I made a mistake. My whole day is ruined.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, the next one, disqualifying the positive. I have somebody in my life that does this, and it's so aggravating, you know, especially as a parent, because they immediately go to the negative or what's going to go wrong, or that's all that they focus on versus like, wait, stop a minute, you know? And again, if you do that, it's funny how that's the reality. So they'll actually make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one I am so guilty of, but mine comes in the form of when someone compliments you on something, and you're immediately like, you know, oh, your hair looks great. I haven't washed it in 3 days. Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
just thank you. You don't need to know that it's really dirty right now. But I think we get these compliments or people say nice things and we're immediately like, that can't be true.
Yeah, I think you and I have done this back and forth with each other before. No, just stop. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, and again, I'm being very like sarcastic warning here. I've never jumped to conclusions.
Yeah. I think that one's exactly what it says. Just jump into conclusions without all the information.
Mm-hmm.
When with jumping to conclusion, I think about an example that I learned years ago in a different treatment modality, that with mind reading, that you walk by somebody, say you're going into the grocery store and you wave at somebody, say hello, and they don't respond.
Mm-hmm.
And then what do I create in my mind? Oh, they didn't say hello because they hate me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I didn't check out what the reality was for them.
Yeah.
I just made my own.
Right. And, you know, we do this so much now, too, with emails and texting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people read messages into something that's actually just a simple, you know, nothing's there.
Yes.
But yeah, we jump into conclusions with them. I used to have a boss, as he learned how to do technology, he would type in all caps, you know, and I'm like, why are you yelling at me for word on time? You know?
Mm-hmm.
But that was just his thing. And it was kind of, you know, we joke about it now, but you know, that's the whole thing. Technically, if somebody's texting or typing at you in all text, that means that there was a feeling or emotion attached to it. And for him, it wasn't. That was just his typing style. So.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one thing I love about that example, Stephany, is because with reality, one of the ways we can get in touch with reality is to, instead of jump to conclusions, get curious.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when someone's sending an all caps email, probably my first reaction is like, whoa, okay. But then just getting curious, like, I wonder, you know? And so, yeah.
And that's a great point of when we are aware that we're doing something, or that I know that it's easy for me to use that distortion, is if I will just stop, and we always talk about stop and, you know, take a breath and then use that. I'm just going to be curious about this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And in other words, I'm just going to get more information, you know, before, I go there. Okay, magnification or minimization. So I kind of know some about this, but kind of talk about this too a little bit more.
So this one's also called the binocular trick. And if you think about flipping around a pair of binoculars, you've got two extremes of what you see, one really close, one really far away.
Mm-hmm.
And so with magnifying or minimizing, it's again getting into those extremes and taking one instance and making it really, really big, or dismissing it. And you put up a slide a little while ago that had a pretty good dismissal.
Mm-hmm.
This is fine.
Yeah.
Not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I can see, and again, I can think of examples of people I've been in relationships with, or, you know, friends who, make things be such a bigger deal than they really are. And the drama of it, or why there's such that response, you know, with that. Absolutely. Okay. Emotional reasoning.
This is, I feel it, therefore it must be true, that kind of thinking. So, and I always tell people whenever they're thinking about emotional reasoning, thoughts aren't facts, because sometimes we get a feeling that, you know, we're not valued, or we feel fear, or we feel, you know, worthless, or we walk into a room and it's like, I look stupid right now. And my brain is like, oh yeah, that's a fact. Yep. And so it's stopping and saying, just because it's an emotional feeling, or just because it's the immediate thought, I mean, it doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah. And well, I can totally see how this all just then connects straight into our self-esteem.
Oh yeah.
Which was one of our other core issues we talked about several weeks ago, but yeah, how that is just building, you know, into all of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Should statements. Yeah. I totally see myself doing this.
These should statements, one of the things that stands out to me with those is that when I'm using those, there's a set of rules that I've got about how the world is supposed to work, including myself. And as soon as those don't go the way that I'm expecting them to, I have a reaction.
Yeah.
I can get angry. I can get really disappointed. And so I can use those shoulds toward me. I can use those shoulds towards other people. One thing that I used to tell people with the shoulds, if you think about them being a rule that this is how the world works, who else got that rule book? Just me. And so when I'm using those shoulds, I'm trying to put my reality on somebody else.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know I turn that on myself a lot. I use the I should have known better statement to myself when I make a mistake. You know, I should have known. I should have caught that. Even things that there really was no way for me to catch. You know, I should have known. And again, I know exactly where that comes from, that perfectionism, you know, part. You know?
One thing that's been helpful with those shoulds is being aware of that language that we use when we're in the shoulds, to shift that away from the word should to want. And in those moments, I can still want what I want, but I'm more tolerant. Right. And one of the examples I've given people is, you know, when you're driving, I want people to use their turn signal. I still want it to happen. Doesn't mean it's going to, but I'm more tolerant in those situations than if I use something like they should use their turn signal.
Yes.
Or they ought to use their turn signal. They must use their turn signal. Those are very hardened words that have an emotional response with them. But if I want, I can still want it and not have that emotional entanglement with that expectation.
What about need? I need them to.
And that's also something that we have to pay attention to, because those needs and wants can get so skewed.
Oh,
we can lose track of what a want is and what a need is.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. In a car, I may need them to use their turn signal so I survive and get to where I'm going.
Right. I can think of many driving situations that would probably help out a lot. Like you said, just be more tolerant with that. Okay, labeling and mislabeling.
Yeah, so this one, I mean, is just assigning meaning to something without really thinking it through. So again, that example of like, I walk into a room and it's like, I look stupid, like I am stupid, or, you know, that's bad, or just labeling something and just that's what it is, not getting curious about it, but just assigning meaning to it. A lot of assumptions about what things mean.
But I can really see when we were younger, if things were labeled for us that were actually mislabeled, you know, and we talked last week about how the awareness levels, you know, you have that awareness level of, you know, you're doing it, you know, and then there's that second level of you're not aware that you're doing that. And so you're not aware that that's mislabeled. I can really see where that, plays a role. And then personalization. I mean, I almost have said that throughout all of these, you know, turning it into.
It's all my fault.
Yeah, it's all my fault. Yeah, to work through those. And again, these cognitive distortions that we all do, regardless of trauma, regardless of background or anything. At some point we've done it, you know, and again, on those two levels, whether we're aware that we're doing it, you know, or not. And can we flip more into these two when we're having higher levels of stress? Or I'm thinking about the last 5 months, you know, as we've been talking kind of about, you know, as I'm in some parts in survival mode, or trying, you know, not to be, and if I'm using any of these to kind of cope.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys. I'm sure, you know, we've talked about some of this, but it seems there's quite a few of them, but that mental filter, because we get so much information through the news. So I've noticed over the past few months, it's like, I'll see one number or I'll see one headline and it's just, my mind is like thinking the worst, you know, not considering any other facts. But I know mental filter is one I've really dealt with this year.
Yeah, and especially with the social media and things that I'm seeing through that, and trying not to go down it as a rabbit hole, you know, and spend all of my time in it.
I've really worked to be more familiar with the language that I use with myself when I'm getting into these cognitive distortions. But I noticed too, just in you asking about in the past 5 months, when I get into really stressful situations, if there's something that is not, the end of what's happening is not known, that it can bring up some fear for me that encourages me to go back to old familiar patterns, whether that's thinking or retreating. But it can bring up that familiarity. And so very quickly I can get back into phrases that I used to use that I don't use as much now. Thinking about the all or nothing, the nevers, the always, and then emotional reasoning is a big one too, that I've got to pay attention to what's coming up for me right now. Because too, with being isolated in the last 5 months and seeing all this stuff on the headlines of the news, it can be really easy to think that everything I'm seeing on my screen is happening a foot outside my door.
Yeah.
And so I've got to be aware that what I'm watching is global. And I don't live in the entire globe. I happen to live in Edmond. So I have to be mindful that the reality I'm creating with the information I'm given is appropriate for where I'm at. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great point. And I know today we've talked a lot about, you know, Rebecca, we talked about the window of tolerance, being out of it, being out of our reality. And so I know next week we want to then talk about how do we stay in our reality, you know. And Steve, you even just kind of mentioned it. Sometimes it's just changing one word, changing the word should to want or need. It changes the whole statement. And there's even, you know, an emotional response. It changes that and that connection with it. So that'll be great to get into. And talk about that.
There's a lot of opportunities for us to get out of our reality, but we've got at least as many opportunities to get back into our reality.
Yeah. And Teresa said the key is awareness. That was the biggest thing last week. And so just bringing us into that awareness of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think also, I mean, recognizing you have a right to your own reality, your own truth.
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes it's like, oh, they have a different reality or truth. Like, oh, that means mine is wrong. But no, you can have two different realities and truths.
Right. Right. That's called perspectives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thanks for joining me. Again, these are always so much fun when we get to do these. So, hey, guys out there, if you would like to hear more on this, join us next week as we talk about reality. But if you have any questions or topics or even things you're struggling with, we keep kind of talking about the pandemic, shoot us a line. You can reach us on all of the socials between Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, or just send us a note at info@greenshoe.org and check that out. And we will see everyone next week.